Hi all, a very good morning. So let's start the session for the day. I'll quickly share the screen. You guys are able to see the screen? Okay. So yesterday we were looking in at the properties of the specific bucket, and we were able to cover up few properties of the bucket in terms of how to host it as a S3 website, how to control the versioning. One sec. I'll quickly navigate to the services and then the S3 part of the services, which is related to the storage. So let's get down to the bucket, and we were exploring the properties of the bucket where we learned about the versioning, server access logging, static website hosting, object level logging, and then about the encryption. Then we also learned what are the tags, how they help us, what is the transfer acceleration, and how does it help. We learned about the events, and finally the last part of our properties on the bucket here is requester pace. Now, if you remember, we would have discussed about the way we are going to pay for the cost of storing the object on the S3. So whenever you're trying to store data on the S3, we are basically charged on the amount of storage capacity we are using, also on the number of put and the get requests. Right? So we all know that the number of put requests are 2000 and 20,000 get requests per month as a part of free tier. So as a part of free tier, it's hardly that we'll be getting something as a bill. So let me show you up here. I'll go down to my billing dashboard. So in your billing dashboard, if you go through once, you'll be able to get the clear notification here. It's still loading. Yeah. So there we go. If I scroll down the page, here it shows the number of S3 puts. If I go ahead and click on view all, so it shows me how many puts are free for specific month and how many gets are free for specific month, right? So as a part of S3 service, number of puts which are free are 2000, and how much I have been used, it shows me here. So I have utilized all of the 2000 requests. So if I'm going to put any new object on the S3 bucket, that is going to actually charge me up. And same is the case with S3 gets. So I'm going to get around 20,000 requests as a free, which are the part of free tier. And currently I have made utilization of only 3,229 requests. So we are basically charged on the number of puts and the gets. So puts is basically whenever I'm trying to upload an object. Gets is basically whenever someone is trying to retrieve the same object which is uploaded on the S3 bucket. And we might also be sometimes charged for the data transfer. So if you are trying to utilize the internet connection of the data center by transferring the data from, let's say, one data center to other, then we are basically charged for the data transfer charges, which is again very minimal. So these are the three ways on which we are going to be getting charged. One is the amount of storage that I'm going to put on the S3, and number of put requests and the get request, and the data transfer. Now when we talk about the requester pays, so what's going to happen? So when I go ahead and enable this requester pays, it says the requester will pay for the request and the data transfer while the requester pays is enabled. Anonymous access to this bucket is disabled. So for the storage, whoever is the owner of bucket, he is going to pay for the storage cost, but we are trying to retrieve the transfer charges as well as the put request get request charges from the user itself. So when we are trying to enable this specific portion, requester pays, right? So what we are trying to do, we are trying to collect the charges in relation to the put request and get request and the data transfer from the end user itself. But there's one more thing that we need to remember. So whenever I am going to go ahead and enable this, there will be no anonymous access to this bucket, right? So it has to be only people who have the authorization access. Like if I go to permissions, I have to define the specific AWS accounts or the people who are going to have access. I cannot have public access on this bucket at all. So in terms of requester pays, so whenever he is going to request any specific object with the link he has got, he will basically pay the amount and then only he will be able to retrieve the object from the cloud S3 bucket. So any questions or queries here on the requester pays part? Okay, so first thing is we need to understand, you'll not be able to do it practically, but just understand the concept here. So on what basis we are going to pay money for using the S3 to AWS cloud, right? So first thing is to understand on what basis I'm going to pay the money. So let's say if we talk about the Google Drive as well, currently it is free up to 15 GB, but if you're trying to exceed more than 15 GB in Google Drive, you have to pay the charges in order to use the storage. Similarly, if you want to use the S3 storage, we are basically charged on three important things. One is storage, so amount of data I'm trying to store, and number of put requests and the get requests. Let's say in terms of storage, every day I am storing 1 GB of file that gets generated from my web server. Okay, just this is, let's say just an example that I'm trying to store 1 GB of file every day, and that is one single file itself. Let's say, so basically by the end of the month, I have 30 GB. Now we all know as a part of free tier we get around 5 GB which is free, but rest of the 25 GB I have to pay the amount. Next, I'm going to be charged for the number of puts and the get request. So if I'm going to put 1 GB of file every day, which is one single file, so I'm going to put it only 30 times. So I'm going to use 30 puts. And let's say there are hundreds of users who are trying to retrieve this file every day after it is loaded. So 100 into 30, it will make it 3000. So 3000 requests are coming per month to retrieve the file, because there are 100 people who are trying to retrieve this file, and let's say there are 30 files already available. So 100 into 30 makes it 3000. So there are 3000 requests which are going to come down for this file. Now the data transfer. The data transfer can be from the AWS Cloud data center to other data center. Right? Specifically, that is the case. But sometimes it might also consider the charges for, let's say, we are trying to download, right? So we are specifically utilizing the internet connection of the AWS data center, right? So even that might be sometimes given up a place for charges. But we are talking, so this is a case scenario which we are going to pick it up. Let's say I'll go down to the S3 calculator. Okay, so in this I'll go down to the Amazon S3 service. This is a calculator which helps me to calculate on what basis I'm going to get charges to be paid for. So here it shows in terms of data transfer how much I'll be paying. So if it is between one region to other region, let's say if I'm transferring 5 GB, and if I go out here, so it says I'm going to get charge of $0.10, right? So that's very minimal. So basically if it is a transfer between one region to other, that is going to be charges of $0.10. And if I say I'm going to download, let's say the amount of data is 5 GB and I'm going to upload, let's say 5 GB, and if I'm also using CloudFront, which is having, let's say 2 GB, and you see still the charges haven't changed much. Yes, there was a charge of data transfer in, there is no charges because you are utilizing your internet connection to put the data, but data transfer out, yes, surely there are charges, that is $0.36. But for currently as a part of free tier, we are going to get it in discount. And data transfer to the CloudFront, again that specific part is also free for a while up to certain limit. Right? So that was about the data transfer. Similarly, in our case, so let's say we are trying to play around with 30 GB, out of which we are also trying to store it in the backup of one of the bucket. So we will be using up to 30 GB here. In the transfer 30 GB, out transfer is also 30 GB for us. In transfer is also 30 GB. We are not using CloudFront for now, so I'll leave it as 0. So your monthly bill is going to be $1.95, but that is after the discount. So if I remove the discount, it is approximately going to be around $3, right, or more than that. So these charges are basically something that we are collecting it from the user upfront. So if the user is trying to go ahead and access the content from my S3 bucket, we are basically asking the user to pay for that, and then you will be able to access the content. So we are basically collecting all the charges which are related to the number of put request and get request, as well as the data transfer. And yeah, so these two charges are something that we are going to ask the requester to pay, and these charges are completely borne by the company, whoever is hosting it. And just one point to remember here is, whenever I go ahead and enable this requester pays, I will not be able to have any public access, because I need to get the money from the requester, right, for the data transfer and the number of put request and the get request. Since I am going to ask the money to be paid by a requester, he should be an authenticated user. So he should have AWS account with to whom I am going to enable this part. So that is about the requester pays. Does that help, Shiva, Divya?
Hi, Pawan.
Hi, Shiva.
Yeah, I have a doubt on put and get requests.
Yeah.
If in case of it might be from AWS, it a wrong correction of request. It may be they will count of more than what we have requested in get or put. Can we calculate from our end how much we have put and get request per monthly basis?
Yeah, so in case you want to calculate it, we may have to enable this server access logging, so that you will be able to see how many get requests and how many put requests are happening, so order to cross verify with the Amazon what is showing up in the billing dashboard.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? So directly we'll not be able to classify it, but we'll also have to
Okay.
see on what basis they are also charging up. So if we enable that logging, in the logs they are going to have a detailed portion on how many
Mm-hmm.
gets I have put said, how many puts have come there. So it will be helping me to find it out.
Okay, these logs can be kept in another bucket, right?
In the same bucket or in another bucket,
Another
wherever.
bucket. Yeah, two options we have, right? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And one more thing, data transfer. I mean, as per you said yesterday, CDN ranges. Is it dependent for distance of ranges as like that?
Data transfer
In that
distance.
chart,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess distance will not matter, because anyway it is fixed, right? If I'm in India, or if you are in somewhere in Australia, let's say, you when you have to download 1 GB of file, it's going to be a 1 GB itself.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so with this we complete the properties part of our S3 bucket. Moving next to the permissions part here. Now the permissions is as same as what we learned for the specific object. Similarly, we can give the access at a bucket level as well. Now this is my AWS account name, so I have got full access to this bucket. So whether it is listing the objects or writing the objects or reading each of the object or writing permissions for the each of the object, like I can also grant permissions to the objects that are available in my bucket to others. So I have full access in accordance with the parameters. Now when I talk about the other AWS accounts, so I'll be able to give them access to the full bucket from here. So I can say whether they'll be able to see all the objects in this bucket, whether they will be able to add new objects to this bucket, and whether they'll also have the permission to grant access to other users or not. So that is what we'll be able to define in this first part. And if I want, I'll also be able to give the public access to the bucket so that everyone will be able to view it. And finally, we have S3 log delivery group. So if you remember in here in the properties, so we have server logs access logging enabled. So in case you want the logs to be enabled, you need to have this log delivery group, which is automatically created, nothing to worry in. So this log delivery group will have access to write the objects as well as the read the object. So it also has the permission to read the objects from the specific bucket, right? So these two permissions are basically given for the S3 log delivery group. Write objects because it has to create the new logs and it has to keep writing to the S3 bucket. So it needs access to write objects. So that is about the permissions part here. So that is in relation to the access control list. Now there are two ways in which we can actually control the access. One is access control list and second is bucket policy. So access control list is very simplest way in which we just have certain levels, right? So what we saw first is as a root user about myself, what all access I have, and then what is the level of access that I can give it to other AWS accounts, whether I can make the access completely public or not. So these are the three levels that we usually have in the access control list. Now, what if I want to control it at a very granular level? I want to give access to specific object inside a bucket, or I want to give access only to a specific set of users, or I want to give access only to the specific IP address, or some IP address is trying to attack my S3 bucket. I do not want to give access to that. I want to specifically stop the access to that IP address, something as such. So if you want to control the access at a very granular level, how do we go with it? So basically, we write it across in the bucket policy, right? So when we go ahead and put across the bucket policy, that is going to add the permission document here. Like if you see, I already have one of the policy document here. So specifically what I was trying to do is I was trying to use this bucket AWS training 2017 along with the CloudFront. Okay, so when I was trying to use it with the CloudFront, I have denied the access to anyone. So anyone who wants to access this AWS training 2017 bucket, they will not be able to access directly at all. So even if they have link of this specific object, like let's say this one. So if I even if I share this link, so they'll not be even able to see this image, right? So I have restricted the complete access to the bucket, but the CloudFront will have the access to that specific bucket. So how did I manage to give only CloudFront the permission? So specifically I am putting in the bucket policy here. So if you check out this bucket policy, we basically write the bucket policies in the JSON language. JSON is nothing but JavaScript notation, and it is basically written in the key value pairs. So I'll have a key and then the value, and it is differentiated by a colon or equal to any kind of symbol we can put it across. So specifically for the this part of JSON, we are using the colon as a separator, and then we are basically writing it up. So version, I'm just putting in 2008 10 17, which means 17th October 2008 this policy document was created. And then the ID is the key value is policy for CloudFront private content, right? So we are basically trying to write a permission document for the CloudFront. And then the statement. Now to give you a very small example here, let me show you this. So let's say we want to prepare one document in the JSON format for ourselves. So I'll just say something like this: name, and then say XYZ, and then let's say what is the phone number of this guy. So we'll just say phone, and then we can go ahead and create it with some number. Now there might be a chance that I need to pick up the something like address. Now we all know that address is a will have multiple lines, as well as it can also have some more key pairs. So what we basically do is, whenever I'm going to have, this is a key and this is actually the value. Now sometimes it does happen that inside this I have other key value pairs. So what can we do? Basically we start with the square brace and end with the square brace. And inside this again we start with a flower brace and we end with a flower brace. And here we'll start writing again the things, like specifically I would like to say what is the house number, and then maybe street, and then maybe the pin code, right? So sometimes it does happen that a specific value like address will have still more multiple values which are to be picked up. So we call them as nested key pairs, right? So this is basically called as nested key pairs, and in the nested key pairs we are basically starting with square brace, ending with a square brace, which again starts with a flower brace, end with a flower brace, and then you will have the values inside this part. So we call them as nested key pair. Similarly, the case is here. So statement has got nested key pairs. So it says SID as one, effect is allow, principal. So who is going to have the access? Specifically, this identity is the only one who is going to have the access. As a normal user, no one will have access to this bucket, but yes, only this CloudFront origin access identity. This identity is the only one who is going to have access to this specific bucket. So we are trying to define it. And what will it be able to do? Action. So it will be able to only get all the objects from this bucket. And what is the resource? Basically, this is the bucket that we are basically trying to access. That is AWS training -2017, and inside this, it should be able to access anything across. Right. So this is how we'll be able to read the JSON documents. And of course, the writing of JSON documents might get little difficult in the earlier. So there's always something called as policy generator, which is available, with the help of which we will be able to start writing small policies. And as and when we are progressing, we can start writing our own policies. So policy generator actually helps us to create the policies here. Now let's say we are going to create a policy for S3 bucket itself. And then it says whether you want to allow or deny the access. Let's say we want to allow it. So principal, basically if we see here, in our case, so it is basically who needs to get the access. So you here, let's say I want to put someone's AWS account number, and then which service they want to get access to. This is S3. And in S3, what should they be able to do? They should be able to put the object. They should be able to get the object. Okay, so I'm just going to put two actions for now. And what is the Amazon resource name? So whatever bucket we are inside, what is the Amazon resource name? So I'll just copy this for now. Or you will also be able to see that whenever you click on bucket policy, you will be able to see the ARN name here itself. Right? So ARN is basically Amazon resource name. I'll go ahead and copy this. And then say, if you still want to put few more statements, you can, or you can also, that is optional anyway. So if you want to add few more statements, you will be able to do so. I have just added one statement. What I'm going to do, I'm saying that this AWS account number should get effect as allow, and they should be able to put the objects as well as get the objects. And this is basically the resource. So if I say general policy, it is going to show me that this is the policy here, right? So it is how I'll be able to create my own JSON document from this policy generator. So any questions here on the bucket policy part of this permissions? Divya, Kirti, Shiva, any questions here? Okay. And finally, we have one more level that is called as course configuration. So course configuration is basically used Yes, initially bucket policy might be little difficult to understand because the JSON language is very new as well. The things are new in S3 because we are learning how to give a access. Now each bucket, whenever I create it, it also gets a name. Like whenever a new baby is born in the world, we give it a name. Right? Similarly, whenever a new S3 bucket is created, we give it a name, and that is called as ARN, that is Amazon resource name, right? So every bucket will have a name. Now, if someone wants to give access to this bucket, they have to follow the certain rules, right? So now first thing is principal. Principal is basically who should get the access. Action is basically what should they be able to do. And resource is basically where should they be able to access, right? So these three things are important: principle, action, and the resource. Principle is basically defining who will have the access. Action is basically defining what kind of access they will have. Resource is basically defining to which AWS resource they are going to have the access. So once you practice a couple of examples, you should be able to get through this bucket policies, right? So in the policy generator, you can try to generate certain policies and then try to attach it to a certain user and then see how it actually works across, right? So it might take a little while, but we'll be able to pick it.
Hi, Pawan.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah. Yeah, bucket policy is this specific to a user or any group of user? Can we apply this bucket policy?
You can also give it to the group of users as well. It's not specific to user, but you can also put it across a certain set of group users as such in the groups. So basically we'll define in the principle whether it is a group or whether that's why it says you can use comma separated values as well, right? So you can also define it to a single user. You can also define it to a certain set of users by putting them in a group together.
Okay. But it's specific to the bucket only. This policy applicable
Yes.
on that particular bucket.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Next is the course configuration. Now course, what happens in the course? So when I click on this, it basically shows course is nothing but cross origin resource access, resource sharing. So if I, let's say, to give you a very good example here, let's say I have a lot of buckets in which I'm all hosting my different set of websites. Okay, so I have 4 to 5 websites which I'm hosting from the S3, and all of these buckets are actually hosting those websites. Now, whenever we load any website, each website will actually have style sheets attached to it. Right? What does the style sheet do? Style sheet specifically help us to give the styling to this complete web page. Like let's see, if I take mouse over this, it is trying to change it to light orange colored. If I click on this, it becomes dark orange colored, right? And here it is dark green in color, and the next part here is light green in color. So all this styling is basically given by the CSS, which we call it as, that is cascade style sheets. So in HTML language, we have this part which is called as cascading style sheets, which is basically going to set the complete styling for this. Like I can say that this should be in bold color, this should be in normal one, this should have a font of this specific size, and if I take mouse over this, automatically this help should come through, right? All this can be actually set in the style sheets. Now let's say I have 5 different websites which are hosted in 5 different S3 buckets. Now I may have one bucket specifically only for the style sheets. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and create one more bucket. In this I have kept all the style sheets actually, and all my 5 websites almost look similar. There's nothing more change. I keep it to be in the simplest format. So I'm using the same kind of styling across all the 5 of them. But for all these 5, I have kept the style sheets inside a specific bucket, which is called as CSS. Let's say the name of bucket is CSS, and inside this I have actually kept all the style sheets. Now with the help of cross origin access, what happens is, let's say one of the bucket is in one other region, second bucket is in Mumbai or something else, right? So let's say each bucket is in different region, and the main CSS bucket is itself in some other region. So I have to basically reference from this bucket to this bucket for the style sheets, right? So in order to set up the connection between one of the bucket referencing the other one, I have to enable the CORS configuration. So that is what the CORS is about. So if you see here in the CORS, let's click on this. So it says it's a sample policy which is already put in here. So it says it starts with the CORS configuration, ends with the CORS configuration. Basically, I have to put a rule in the CORS, like from where I'm going to get the style sheets. So it says allowed origin, right? So in origin, I'm basically putting where will the source be available, from where it is going to get the data. So here I have to put the link to this specific style sheets bucket. So I'll go ahead and put this link here, and then basically it says allowed method is get, so it is going to get it from there, and maximum timeout is 3000 seconds, and then the allowed header is basically authorization. So with this CORS configuration, we will be able to easily refer back to one of our S3 bucket which is used for styling, and in this bucket I'm going to only keep the objects which are related to my website, right? So I'm not going to keep my style sheet along with the website at all. So I'm going to keep my style sheets completely in a separate bucket, and then I'm going to make a reference to it. So in order to make that reference completely work in sync with other S3 bucket, we have something called as CORS configuration. So it helps us. If you read the help definition here now, it says CORS defines ways for the web clients that are loaded in one domain and interact with the resources in the different domain, right? So if you have something else in way elsewhere, you'll be able to easily interact with the CORS configuration. So any questions here on the CORS?
Yeah, please, Pawan, once repeat about the overview of course.
Which one, Shiva? Can you
I
come back?
meant to say about purpose of the course.
Yeah, as I just said, right? So let's say I just write the HTML language in all of these buckets to prepare my website, but I'm not writing any style sheets because the style sheets are only written once for my case, and I'm following a standard. Like if you see, some companies will have their own standards. Now, if you talk about the Amazon itself, now whenever you are going to open up this billing dashboard, see if I open this page dashboard or the bills or the cost explorer or the budgets, they have specific style sheet attached to it, right? So if I say as a bills, you see the link has changed here. It says bills. And if I say reports, it is going to go down to the new link that is called as reports. If I say payment methods, it is going to a new one. So each of this basically is trying to retrieve the style sheet. So I'm not changing these methods here on the top, right? So this is basically with the help of style sheet. So if I remove the style sheet, it will no longer appear the way it is. So basically the style sheets will be here. So here you can see the style sheets, right? So if I go ahead and remove all of this, so it says here, right? What is the kind of font which we are going to use across? So background color, it is FFF. Let's say I would like to change it to some, it's not getting applied. The moment I'm going to change it, see, it has become so big, right? So basically all these things of how much font this should be, what color this should look, everything is actually defined in. Yes. So specifically for every web page, like if I open Flipkart, it will have a certain style sheets of styling itself, right? Because of the styles itself, the web pages look very neat and clean, right? So if I open up this, it has got certain specific style sheet, like applying the blue color here, and then the font which is little italic mode, and then it shows here the products, right? And this font is very, again, little small size. And I have a yellow colored button here, right? So, and I have a bell icon. So all this is basically, we can style it with the help of style sheets itself. So similarly, what I'm trying to do is, let's say I have got certain set of websites, Flipkart, Paytm, Amazon, and all those things. And let's say my look and feel of all the websites almost is same, right? I'm not changing much because I'm using the standard style sheets. In that case, I'll have so many buckets which are referencing to the master bucket. Let's say I do not, so in this case, which is all referring to the master bucket, I don't have to write the CSS style sheets every time for each of these websites. So what I have done, I have created a separate bucket for the CSS style sheets, and then I'm trying to refer them from that specific bucket itself. Okay. And let's finally move down to the management section here. So in the management, basically we are trying to manage what we can do with the bucket. Now, we all know if I try to store everything as a part of S3 standard, it is going to cost me a bomb. And let's say if something happens to the Mumbai region, how am I going to save my data? Complete Mumbai region is down, let's say, due to some other reason. How am I going to save the data? Right? So all these things we are going to learn as a part of management. So what we are going to do is, first part is we are going to learn about replication today. So what does the replication basically mean? Replication means, I'll just first go ahead and delete this. Yeah, so it says you haven't created any cross-region replication rules for now for this bucket. You can actually go ahead and create one. So what does it actually do? As the name itself says, replication, which means cross-region replication. So I'm trying to create one more bucket in some other region in the AWS, and I'm trying to store the complete bucket content in that back as a backup. Right, so that is what the cross-region replication basically mean. So I'm trying to create a backup of my certain bucket completely onto the another bucket in some other region. So let's go ahead and quickly create one rule. Now basically it is going to ask you whether you are going to one sec, I'll just refresh the screen. Okay, so the first part is adding the life cycle rule. Now first thing is it is going to ask you for the name of the rule. So what is, so this is life cycle rule. We are talking about the replication. Sorry about it. Yeah. So when we go down to the replication rule, it is going to ask me what is the replication rule that you want to get started with, and it is going to ask you whether you want all the contents in this source bucket to be replicated to the destination bucket, or you want only specific part of it. Like let's say I have an images folder inside this, and I want to only send that specific portion as a backup to the other bucket. So you can actually define whether if you want to send all the contents or only a specific folder inside a bucket. So here is the option. We can use prefix in this bucket. So currently I'm going to keep it as entire bucket. And now what is the status enabled? So this status enabled means basically the versioning should be enabled on the source bucket. So this bucket should be enabled with the versioning. If it is disabled, I'll not be able to create a replication role itself. Let's see. I'll just go ahead and suspend the versioning here, and then we'll try to create. So you see, it clearly gives me a warning saying that I'll not be able to create a replication rule because the versioning is not enabled. So I have to enable the versioning on the source bucket as well as the destination bucket as well. So we are going to learn about the destination bucket as well in a little while in the next step. So let's put here in terms of replication, what are the important cases? Source bucket should have the versioning enabled. That is the first rule. And now, what is your criteria? So would you like to encrypt each and every object while you're trying to send it to the destination bucket? You can also do that by clicking on this. For now, I'll just keep it simple. So I want to move all the contents of my AWS Training 2017 bucket as a backup in the some other bucket, and I am already enabled the versioning. I'll just go ahead and click on next, and now it is going to ask me destination bucket. Where would you like to go ahead and replicate the data to? So here I'll be able to see the list of buckets which are available in my AWS account. In case if you want to create a new bucket, you can also always click on this create new bucket. So let's say we are going to create a new bucket, and the name of bucket will be something like So I'll just say backup. The name of the bucket which I'm going to create is going to be backup. And now it's up to us to decide in which region I want to keep. Since it is a cross-region replication, I need to have this bucket in some other region apart from the where this bucket is existing. So currently our bucket is in Mumbai. So I'm going to create apart from Mumbai, we are going to create it anywhere else. Let's say I want to choose Ireland, and then we'll go ahead and create it. But before we create, here you get an option, change the storage class for the replicated objects. Right? So what does this mean? It is basically asking you, in case if you would like to change the storage class, like if you're trying to store it as S3 standard in the source bucket, in the destination bucket also, would you like to continue with the same storage, or would you like to change the class? So it is always better to continue with the same class, because tomorrow, let's say if the complete region is down and now you want to restore the complete contents from that bucket back, so at the time you will not be able to decide which one was S3 standard, which one was S3 IA, or which one was RRS, right? So it's always better to leave this option as is and then go ahead and say next. Now we learned in the IAM section one thing there, right? So we have users, groups, and the roles. I told that we will use the roles when one AWS service wants to talk to other AWS service. So in this case, I want to talk from S3 bucket, one S3 bucket to other S3 bucket itself, right? So the most secured way will be creating a role. So this role is basically going to help me with it. So if I say, I'll just go ahead and say create a new role, or else you can also create a role which is already available. So it's better always to create a new role. So automatically this replication rule itself will create a role between the source bucket and the destination bucket. So I'll just go ahead and say next, and then it's going to review, give an option to review this. So what is happening in here? On the source bucket, I already have the versioning as enabled, and the bucket is AWS training-2017, and I'm going to pick up all the objects in this bucket. And currently my bucket is in Asia Pacific Mumbai region, and the destination bucket is going to be the AWS training 2017 backup, which is going to be a part of Ireland region, and the storage class is as same as the source bucket itself. And then I have given permissions to create a new role automatically. Now let's go ahead and save this.
Hi, Pawan.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, do we have charger for this replication for bucket?
Yes, it is going to charge because it is a inter-data transfer, inter-region transfer.
Okay.
So we are trying to transfer the data from one region to the other.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Right? So it is going
It's
to
considered under inter-region transfer. Right?
data transfer, correct.
Okay. Okay.
Now, if we go down to the source destination bucket, let's see where the destination bucket has been created. Here it is. It is a part of the Ireland region, right? You can see that it is a part of Ireland, which has been just created on 30th of November. I'll click on this, and now if you go down to the properties, you will see that the versioning is automatically enabled on the destination bucket. So always remember, whenever you want to enable the replication, both the source and the destination bucket should have versioning enabled. If not, it is not going to work correctly. So the rule number one is source bucket and the destination bucket, both of them should have the versioning to be enabled. Now we see that this bucket is currently empty, right? There's nothing inside it, right? But our normal bucket already had a lot of things inside it. AWS Training 2017 bucket already has a lot of things here, but none of these things actually came up to the our bucket here. So what is the rule number two? Rule number two is basically replication is going to replicate all the future objects after the rule is enabled. So whatever are the existing objects, it will not get replicated. They have to be manually copy pasted. However, if you want to talk about the replication, then it is going to only replicate about all the future objects. So let's see what are the future objects. I'm going to go ahead and add one file here. Let's see if it is going to get uploaded and then get replicated automatically. So I'll go back here, and let's say I want to pick up this PNG file, Airtel speed test PNG file. I'll just go ahead and upload this across. Right, it is successfully uploaded now. I'll go back to the backup bucket and wait for a while. So it is going to take a little while for the backup bucket to receive that. So currently it is empty. So in next couple of seconds, you will be able to see that the file is already available. So any questions or queries until this object gets replicated on the cross region replication? How about you, Kirti and Divya? Okay, I'll quickly refresh this page. Yeah, there we go. So the new object, whatever we have created, has automatically been replicated to the backup bucket. Right? So this is how the replication is going to work. It is going to only help the objects which are uploaded later the replication is enabled, right? So whatever objects are existing from the previous, those will not get replicated. For them, I have to manually copy paste and do it across. So that was the first part of our management thing. That is about cross region replication. So you can add as many rules as you want to, right? So currently we have only one rule, which is in the bucket AWS string 2017. Here it is, right? So basically we have created one rule, and this is going to actually go ahead and do the complete replication part. So that is it for today, guys, and we'll meet back tomorrow again to cover up the next portion of our management section, that is with lifecycle rules, analytics, metrics, and the inventory. So any questions for today's part of the session before we close it? Okay, great. So thanks all for your time, and we'll meet back tomorrow again at the same time in the morning to continue with the next part of our S3. Have a great day, and we'll meet back tomorrow.